America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker with the Job Creators Network, and today we're joined by Bill Mathis, a small business owner and Caribou coffee franchisee in Florida, who's seeing firsthand how tax reform is impacting growth, hiring, and employee retention. Bill has a real-world perspective on what it takes to build and expand a business in today's economy and why pro-growth policies matter on Main Street. Bill, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Elaine. It's great to be here.
Well, you're not just a Caribou coffee franchisee. You're also a Subway franchisee, but in another state, in Minnesota. How did you get into franchising to begin with, and what made you start in Minnesota? And we'll talk about what brought you to Florida.
Okay. So back in 1992, I started as a field consultant for Subway, and accelerating to 2001, there was a store in Minnesota that closed. I lived and I've been born and raised in Minnesota. And there was a store in my territory that closed, and my boss asked me if I knew anybody that wanted to buy it. And I said, I do. And I literally had $500 in our bank account. I went home and told my wife about this, and she goes, you're nuts. She worked for Sodexo Marriott, had a great job. And so I talked to my boss, and he was willing to loan me the money and get me started. And so I went from one store to four stores in about a 6 or 7 year time period.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And you still have those stores in Minnesota?
I have three of the four. Yep. I sold one a few years ago. It's still a great store, but it was just, sometimes in business it's just time to move along and go on to other things. But I still love the brand of Subway, and that's why I still have three of them.
I love the brand Subway too, but it's because I eat the subs all the time. So you came to Florida. What brought you to Florida then to open a Caribou coffee?
Yeah, so a little bit on that story is that I was quite involved in the Subway advertising board for Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we would do sponsorships. We sponsored the Minnesota Twins, and through that you make some connections. And to keep the story short, one year, I don't remember the year, but somebody from Caribou Coffee called me and said, hey, would you mind talking to us about franchising? And we're thinking about franchising, and what are the ups and downs of it? And we had about an hour and a half conversation. At the end of it, I said, my wife and I have a part-time house down in Florida. If you're ever going to franchise in Florida, give me a call. And it was, no kidding, about a year later, I got a phone call and said, hey, are you interested? And this time, when I brought something to my wife, she was like ecstatic, because we love the brand, and it was a chance. There was the pathway to move to Florida, eliminate the cold, the snow, and there's a lot of beautiful places in Minnesota, but after many winters, it gets long. So, and she likes the green, the palm trees, and so do I. So it was an easy pathway to get down here.
Well, my experience with Caribou Coffee was when I lived in Michigan. And when I was preparing for this interview with you, I went to search, because I love Caribou Coffee, and I went to search for, I'm in Orlando, Florida, by the way. I went to search for the nearest Caribou Coffee around me, and it's you over in Tampa. That is the nearest Caribou Coffee. There are none here. So there's great opportunity here in Orlando for you too, because I'll tell you secretly, I like them way better than Starbucks in terms of the coffee. I'm not a big Starbucks fan in terms of their coffee. It's kind of bitter, and I don't like the creamers at all. So,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunity over here. But I was excited to have you on because, first of all, we are Small Business Week is happening currently, and I know you had an op-ed in the Tampa Bay Times, which was also picked up by Real Clear Policy and distributed very far and wide. And I know you talk a lot about the policies in the Big Beautiful Bill Act or the Working Families Tax Credit, however you want to call it. I love the Big Beautiful Bill Act name myself, but and you're talking about the policies in that bill and how it has helped you with your company. And one of the things that stood out to me is where you say, while numerous provisions help small businesses, I believe the biggest benefit came from those that helped ordinary workers the most. No tax on tips or overtime. Tell us about that, why that's the biggest benefit you see out of that bill.
Well, I gave a little bit of my story of how I got into Subway and where I am now. And I think people when they're given opportunities, and I think the less taxes on the harder they work, the better opportunities they're given. So when I have managers that are working, we have them work roughly about 45 hours a week. We don't put them on salary. And so now when they're working overtime, they're not being taxed on that. So they feel more rewarded. And then from the person who works 10 hours a week to the person who works 40 hours a week, when you're providing great service and earning those tips and not getting taxed on them, it was really the one thing that jumped out at me when this bill was introduced. And I heard about this and I thought, this is going to be great for college kids, for young people, which we hire a lot of young people. Most people aren't going to stay at Caribou or Subway for 20, 25 years. Some do, but most don't. And this is a great opportunity for them to work harder and learn skills through this and understand that the service that they provide rewards them without being taxed. And I thought it was a great idea.
You haven't had, you didn't have the Caribou Coffee franchises when COVID was going on, but during COVID, there was massive labor shortages, and part of it was the government policy of paying people to stay home. But it became just a snowball effect of labor challenges in hiring and retaining people. What effect have you seen on your ability to recruit and retain your employees as a result of some of these policies?
Well, I think on the policy side, we're all on the same playing field now. So, no matter where you go to work, if you're earning tips, you're not getting taxed on them. But I think it's the culture we build within. And then it gives those people a better opportunity to say, hey, my job's great here. Plus, I'm not being taxed on these things. I also think it might lean into people considering going into the service field as well. So I might be able to earn some more income and not be taxed on that. Whereas if I was to work at some different concept, I don't want to pick one out, but say retail, where you're not getting tips. Maybe somebody in retail says, hey, I might want to go work in the service industry now. Maybe I want to be a barista instead of a salesperson at a department store or a clother or whatever, because I'm not going to get taxed on that extra income. And now I can't say on this podcast that I've actually seen that happen, but I think when people start to see the benefits of it, certainly that's an opportunity for people to take a look at, and I think they will.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, when the bill went through with no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, did you have conversations with your employees about the policies and how it impacted them?
Yeah, with a few of them, because some of them are just like, it's like regular politics until it hits the kitchen table, right, or it hits your pocketbook. People don't pay attention until those things happen. But I did have employees ask me about it and explained it to them, and they were kind of not understanding it totally because they were like waiting for that to happen, like right then and there. And it's going to come down later when they did their tax returns. But they were very excited about it. That's for sure. And without providing numbers, in some days the tips are pretty substantial, especially in the coffee business. And it's real money for people that are working hard and trying to make better for themselves.
Yeah, I find that interesting that every business owner that I ask, did you have conversations about how this bill impacted their paychecks? All of them have said yes. But the second thing is exactly what you said, is that the employees came and asked them. So the employees were aware, they were following it. These kinds of policies were, very beneficial to employees. They were following it, and they understood how it impacted them, or they had some inkling that it was going to impact their paychecks. Maybe they didn't know when, immediately, or when they filed their taxes. But I find it interesting that they really did follow along and knew the benefits, right away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's for sure. And I think we discredit some people sometimes. They really do pay attention to your point. When they hear something like that they're not going to get taxed on overtime and tips. So, it really hits home.
Yeah. Well, you're in a super competitive environment, but as I mentioned, there are no other stores like yours. And I'm just curious, in coffee, and where do you see growth in your industry right now?
In the coffee industry specifically?
Yeah.
Boy, I'm in the Subway business too, as we talked about, and that's competitive, but I didn't realize how competitive the coffee business is, especially in our market in St. Petersburg. There's a lot of local mom and pops, which are great places to go, but there's a lot of them. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. There's some other brands that are trying to go national, and I don't want to give them any props, so I'm not going to mention them here, but some of them are making some good headway, and some aren't. So, we feel like we've got a great product. And so when you have a great product, then you can provide it with great service and build a great culture inside your building. I think that's what's going to win the day.
Absolutely. So you have an incredible perspective, having franchises in 2 different states with very different policies. One is led by a Democratic governor, one is led by a Republican governor. This is not meant to be political. When I go down this road with you, I just want to point out the obvious. I want you to kind of give me an overview of doing business in a state with, in Florida's case, no state income tax, but low taxes, low regulations, low barrier to entry, and versus a state like Minnesota. And talk to us about sort of navigating those 2 things, because Minnesota is very different in terms of an economic environment than Florida.
Yes, it is. So when I've always heard there's no state income tax in Florida, and I always think they're going to come and get you another way, and certainly there's some other taxes in Florida, but it's a great benefit to live here for sure and do business. And to draw some of the contrasts, I just look at myself as like a normal guy, so I'm really honored and privileged to be on a podcast with you like this. And to make this surreal or simple is that the first time I did a payroll for our Caribou coffees in Florida, I looked at the state income tax line, and I couldn't believe the amount of taxes that I wasn't paying. And I do the payrolls concurrently, so I do the Subway payrolls for Minnesota at the same time I do the Caribou payrolls. And then I look at the taxes that I have to pay as an employer in Minnesota. I was astounded. I mean, it is completely night and day. Literally, we could be talking $20 to $30 on a state level in some cases. And I don't have a lot of employees in the Subway business. It's not because I'm not doing well. I just don't have a huge payroll there, like some other big companies, and it might be $1,000 or $1,500 difference. And we're talking about 5 employees. We're talking really pretty minimum hours and not a huge payroll. And I couldn't believe it because I had heard of all this stuff, like there's no state income tax and all this. I'm like, okay, well, when I do my personal taxes, I'll see that, right? And I did that first payroll, and I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. So from my aspect, it just allows us to have more capital. And, some people think, well, business owners, they're all rich and, they have all this money. And it's capital that we can use to make our job environment better. We just hired a marketing agency over in Tampa that's going to come to work for us in addition to the things that Caribou does for us. So these types of policies help us, grow faster. And you were talking about, well, there's a lot of opportunity in Orlando. The more capital, more cash flow I can have, the better chance I can keep going across I-4 and move my way to Orlando.
Absolutely. It's great over here. And you have a definite customer if you come.
I need thousands of you.
Well, speaking of capital, having extra capital, you were able to take advantage of some other provisions in the Big Beautiful Bill for small business owners, and that was the immediate expensing. How has that impacted your business as well with your new flooring?
Did you ask me about the flooring?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had a good floor in there, and but it was really difficult to clean. It was slip resistant, which we need in restaurants. You absolutely have to have that, or your work comp bills are going to go through the roof. But the team had a tough time cleaning it, and it was the first time we experimented with it. And so we thought, with the tax provisions that are in place, maybe we got a little bit of room here to just replace this floor. And it took us maybe 12 hours. They did it overnight, and the team came in the next day, and they were just amazed. They were like, it looks great. And then when we had to clean the floor, they were like, this cleans so much better. And so if you're not operating in the business itself, it's like, okay, well, that's great. But the employee morale, when we can make people's jobs easier, it is so good for the team. They feel better about their job. They feel better about, where they work. And I was kind of touched on that a little bit before about building a great culture. So while I can build a great culture, my wife Michelle can build a great culture in the store, these kinds of things help us to be able to do that, because we can smile and give them pats on the backs and reward them in some ways. But these kinds of things make the biggest difference that you don't realize until you're actually in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as like your perspective, there's a lot of turmoil, obviously, with high gas prices as a result of the Iran conflict. I mean, it's sort of a direct result. And it's, if you could say anything about the current sort of inflation on oil prices, which is hard for working people, everyday ordinary working people, the gas bills are high, even in Florida, but it's a direct result of the conflict in Iran. And when it goes away, this is what you could actually term the word that I hate the most, transitory inflation, right? Versus what we heard in the previous administration about that inflation. If we can look at beyond that, do you feel, what is sort of your overall outlook about the future economic outlook for your business or the overall economy? Are you feeling positive? I did read that you're going to open another location soon.
Yeah, so you asked me about Minnesota and Florida, and two different states, geographically and politically. And I know you said you didn't want to get into it politically, but I'm not excited about expanding my business in Minnesota. Just some of the additional taxes besides the income tax, and some of the regulations that they have placed on me. But in Florida, I'm very excited about it. You know, the gas prices are a big deal. It hits everybody in the pocketbook. And I got to tell you, it's different here in Florida, or maybe I see it differently, is it certainly affects people, but people are still happy. They're still gregarious. They want to go out. They want to be outside and partake in, whether it's just walking downtown or being out and about. And that's nothing against Minnesota. It just feels different down here. And maybe I'm carrying that over from COVID a little bit on how the two states handled themselves during COVID. When I would come down here, I felt like I was free again. And, so that was years back. But I feel positive about the growth in Florida. I hope that the governor's replacement that succeeds him is also thinks a lot like he does. And so that would be very, very positive. So.
Absolutely. So you feel good about the economic future and policies in place in spite of the turmoil. I always have to kind of preface that right now because I know gas prices are tough for people and they impact not only your employees, but obviously it costs money to truck the stuff to you, your products. And so, I understand that part, but it seems like everyone I talk to, small business wise, they understand that piece of it and they know this is a short-term pain.
Yeah, for sure. There are some challenges across all industries right now, and because of freight, and I don't understand all the particulars, but there some trucking companies are taking other jobs over others, and it's delaying shipments on products that we serve to the consumers, and it also increased costs. When they distributors can come back to the franchisor and the franchisees and say, look, we've got this increased diesel cost here that's gone up quite a bit. It's in the contracts, we pass it along, and that affects us. And we can't, as business owners, or at least I feel like I shouldn't, take that cost and send it to the consumer because this is short term. And I don't want to go up and down in my prices on my menus and start confusing the customer. I want them to have a consistent experience and understand that, we're going to be baseline here and this is a short-term situation that they're dealing with. And so they won't have to feel the impact specifically at our restaurants.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. Well, you truly have the tale of two states to tell. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from what your observations are doing business in two different states, run very differently, and that have created two very different economic environments. One has obviously been expensive and higher regulations, higher costs, higher taxes, more difficult to navigate as a business owner. And one has been welcoming for your capital, easier to hire people, low taxes. I mean, you've pointed out some very important things. And that is really what conservative policy is about, is allowing people pro-growth, pro energy and pro low tax to allow small business owners to keep more of their hard-earned money so that they can invest in their employees, invest in their businesses, and invest in their communities. It makes it very hard to do when the government is not your partner, as what it sounds like in a state like Minnesota.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's a misconception by the public that see small business owners as, well, we give them a tax cut and they just keep the money. Well, the people that are way richer than I am didn't open up one or two restaurants per se, or one or two locations, and any tax cut they got, they just kept it. They wouldn't be where they're at today. They're taking that money and they're expanding their business. Like you said, they're hiring more employees, opening more locations. When they do, they're going to have to buy more products and services in order to make those things happen. Even from hiring a marketing agency to hiring more landscapers because you have more, more properties to take care of, all kinds of things. So we as small business owners have to do that. And I hope to get to that point someday where there's people that have been wildly successful. But again, it's not because they had a couple locations and they got a tax break and they kept it, to themselves. They wouldn't be where they're at today. So that's what I'm always chasing.
It's about investing back in your business and growing your business, growing jobs. And as a result, there's really a domino effect there. Just like you had new floors put in, you used a local floor installer who, then hired local workers to do the installation. And you can see how the domino effect occurs as a result of good policies. And I do believe that there is a constant effort to divide us, this class division and class warfare, and tax the rich, and these tax cuts are just for the rich. And my argument now is all they did was pass the status quo. They kept the lower tax rates in place, which helped everybody, including small business owners. But even people on the low income of the spectrum, those tax cuts stayed in place. They brought back immediate expensing and made it permanent, which is huge for our small business owners. But the new taxes that were put in place were directed right at middle-class America through no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. And millions of employees and Americans across the country took advantage of those provisions on April 15th when they filed their taxes.
Yeah. I haven't talked to anybody about their tax returns because it's really none of my business, but I'm sure that when they got a little bit more money back than they had in years past, it was definitely noticeable.
Absolutely. There were 50 million people who took advantage of one of those provisions. No tax on Social Security, no tax on tips, and no tax on overtime. 50 million Americans took advantage of those provisions, which tells me they're a little bit popular.
Yeah, that's a huge number.
It is a huge number. Number. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your tale of two states and about your growth with Caribou Coffee in Tampa. I hope you make it over to Orlando. I'm happy to share some good locations with you if you're interested, and taking the time to talk about your op-ed with us today.
No, thank you. It was my honor and privilege. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back. It is a powerful reminder that when small businesses are given the room to grow, they can create jobs, strengthen communities, and drive the American economy forward. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Main Street Matters, part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes drop every Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe at Salem Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode.